and start this. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining BraunWeiss Team Talks, our informational webinar and Q&A hosted by BraunWeiss Management Consulting Group. Today's presentation will be on merchant services and digital payments. At BraunWeiss, we specialize in business strategy, customer experience and technology implementations, digital transformation, and finance and accounting operational excellence. We were founded in 2014 and are located in the greater Boston area. Today's webinar of merchant services and digital payments will be presented by Roberto, our project manager, and I, Chayton, will be the host for today. If anyone has any questions throughout the webinar, please type them in the Q&A chat and I will ask Roberto at appropriate times. All right, Roberto, the floor is yours. Thank you for being here today.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Chayton, and it's a pleasure to be here. And so why don't we start off with the agenda for today. So we're going to be, like you mentioned, talking about what are merchant services. So the first stop is going to be to understand in a broader view what are merchant services. Then we're going to talk about PCI and DSS compliance. Since this is a very highly regulated industry, we need to understand what PCI compliance is and what are the main players in this regulations. After that, one of the most important players that we're going to be talking about are payment processors. So for payment processors, we have two options when we're talking about merchant services. One is to work with aggregators. The second one is to work with through merchant accounts. We're also going to go in detail to talk about these two options and understand which one works better for us. But regardless of whether you're using aggregators or through merchant accounts, there are a variety of apps and features that you can integrate to your solutions. And we're also going to mention the most common ones and how can you use them to optimize your operations. At the end, after hearing about everything that we can connect to make our operations flow in a better way, we're going to talk about how to choose the right solution, the right option for your business or for your website or for your physical business. So merchant services. If you work in digital projects or if you have your own business, you might be familiar with merchant services and what they are. So merchant services are those enablers to your that you connect in your business that help you accept a transaction payment through a secure encrypted channel using a customer's credit card or debit card. The three most important players or platforms that you have to set up in order to accept payments are payment gateways, payment processors, and merchant accounts. So in order to understand better how they work, we're going to go over how this merchant services process flow happens, or how the data moves from one step to the other. So the merchant services process starts and finishes with the customers. A customer might show up to your physical business and go to your counter and swipe or insert their credit cards on a POS platform, or they might go to your digital platform, a website, and they can input their credit card information on a form or a payment gateway that they have there. This is the first stop for the credit card information. From there, the information flows to a second step, which is a payment processing company. Like I mentioned before, at this point, you have two different options. One is to use payment aggregators, and the second option is to use a through merchant account service provider. I'm not going to talk in detail on this slide because I have prepared a comparison between what are the benefits to use aggregators or through merchant accounts, and we're going to be discussing that later on. What we have to know at this step is that a payment processing company has to be connected to a merchant account, which is a bank account that sits in a bank that we call the acquiring bank or the processor. This processor bank will help with the fraud check or background check of the transaction, and this is the first background check that we do in the transaction. After the payment processor performs this background check, they send the information of the transaction to the credit card associations, which are Visa, MasterCard, American Express. And even though they don't accept or decline the transaction at this point, since they are not issuing banks, except for American Express, and I think there are others out there that are also issuing banks. But what they do is that they collect an interchange fee, and then they pass that information to the issuer bank. The issuer bank makes sure that there are funds associated to this credit card, makes a final background check on the information, and either accepts or declines that transaction, and sends the information back to your payment gateway, where you receive a notification. And after this notification, you can either start the shipping process, notify your customer that the transaction has been approved, or also notify your customer that the transaction has been declined.
Before we move on here, Roberto, just a couple of quick questions that came in. The first one is, what are some common examples of a fraud check?
Well, can you repeat the question, please?
Yeah, so what are some common examples in these point of system processes that are a fraud check? Could you elaborate just a little bit more on that, please?
Yes, let me go back to the previous slide. So a fraud check, in the first step, for example, when a payment processing company makes a background check or a fraud check, they are, like I mentioned, connected with a bank, and in this bank, they have the information that related to this specific credit card. So they can find information like what's the account linked to this credit card, if this credit card has funds to actually cover this transaction, or if this is a credit card that might be a fraudulent transaction. They have this acquiring banks or processors connected with a payment processor have the ability to identify, to link to pretty much the entire network of credit card associations and understand and analyze through algorithms if this could or not be a potential fraudulent transaction. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, I think that's sufficient for that question. Couple other questions real quick, just one more before we move on. It's pretty relevant. Ken asked, what are the benefits of using the merchant account here?
Well, there are a lot of benefits on using a merchant account. I'm going to talk specifically about it in the next slide. So, but at the top of my mind, you can lower your costs if you use a true merchant account, since this is actually an account, a bank account, direct that you directly link to your business. Is unique. You receive a merchant ID number that is unique to your business. So the most important, I think, characteristic is that you can definitely lower your costs with a true merchant account. But I'm going to talk a little bit more in the next slide.
All right, thank you, Roberto. Yeah, that's very sufficient for now. I know we're going to get more into detail with that.
Okay, thank you, Jaden, and thank you, Ken. So, like I mentioned at the beginning, this is a very regulated industry. So in order to operate in this, all of the players, payment gateways, payment processors, banks, they have to comply with PCI, Payment Card Industry Data Security Standards. And what this is an information security standard for organizations that handle branded credit cards, like all the ones, credit card associations that I've mentioned before. There's a variety of regulations that you have to comply with when you are in this industry. But in summary, I think the three most important ones that are relevant to this talk is that these regulations have to be applied when you build or maintain a secure network and system. This is when you're building a new application and you're integrating different software. all of them have to comply with PCI. The second one is the most critical one, is that all of these applications have to have the settings and the capability to hide the cardholder data or the credit card information. And the last one that is also very important is that anyone involved in this industry has to regularly monitor and test the networks that they have already set up. And this is not in terms of assessment. It depends on who are you in the process. If you are a merchant, for example, you're the final owner of the application. Depending on the transaction volume that you have, you might have to fill out a self-assessment or an external assessment. And also depending on the transaction volume that you have or that your business has, this assessment is going to have to be either quarterly or annual. If you are a payment processing company, there's a form that you have to present annually to the IRS with a consolidation of the cross credit card payment information and transaction volume from all of your clients. So it varies depending on where you are in the process, but everyone involved has to present evidence. And as you can see on the picture on the right, there are the PCI levels of compliance. There are 4 levels. The first one being the most rigorous one, and that applies to companies with more than 6 million transactions a year. So, for example, if you're working with a forms provider or with a payment processing provider, and you see that they offer level 1 PCI compliance, that means that they have the highest level of PCI compliance for your business, and this is a really good thing. But let's go back a little bit to that specific step of the process, which is a payment processor company. And here's where you have 2 options. The first one is that you can work with aggregators. Aggregators, some of the most famous aggregators are PayPal, Stripe, WePay, or Square. And I'm sure that you might have heard about them if you're in this industry. What happens with an aggregator is that you actually do not have to apply for a merchant account yourself. What you do is that you become a sub-merchant and you are given an aggregate license to use their merchant account. The benefit of working with aggregators is that they're very easy to sign up and they're free to sign up, most of them. There's not an actual background check. So even when during the application process, they ask you what are your products and services, at the end, they don't really know exactly what your product and service is because they don't do a background check per se. And therefore, the third benefit is that it's such a quick process. And in a matter of seconds and minutes, you can actually start collecting payments through your digital platform or even in your physical business. The downside of this is that since there's not an actual application process and they don't know a lot about your business, they use very powerful algorithms to determine if the transactions that you are performing in your business are legal or fraudulent. So even when you're actually doing a legal transaction, if the algorithm determines that the transaction might be somehow risky, they can freeze the funds and you might not be able to access those even in months. Another problem that you might have with them is that since these applications are so accessible for everyone, they are often abused and used for fraudulent transactions. So you might want to also try to perform some measures on your own through your other applications, maybe forms or your CRM applications, to make sure that you limit the possibility of a fraudulent transaction. And the last, we can say, downside of this is that everyone pays the same. It doesn't really matter your volume of transactions or what your business does. You're going to pay the same as everybody else, which is usually around 2.9% plus 30 cents per transaction. Through merchant accounts, on the other hand, are like a bank account application. Some of the most famous companies and really good companies on through merchant account providers are TCs, First Data, Chase Payment Tech, and 2Checkout, more specifically for international transactions. And you have to go through an application process. There is a risk analysis involved, and they have to know what are the products that you're selling, what's your business doing, what are your transaction history, etc. There are a lot of questions for them to give you a merchant account, and at the end you are given a merchant ID number, which is unique to your business. Therefore, there's no middleman in this transaction process. The price is another advantage, like I mentioned at the beginning to Ken, is that since this is a more specific service to your business, the price is calculated depending on what you need. So usually it's around 2% per transaction, or you might be paying a monthly fee, a monthly rate for your transactions.
Great. Real quick, Roberto, before we move on, got a couple of questions from our Q&A chat here about the differences between, aggregators and these true merchant services. The first one kind of lines up with Ken's question from earlier, and that one is, what are the main differences between, aggregators and true merchant services?
So the main difference, in very simple words, is that an aggregator is both of them are connected to a merchant account. But when you're using an aggregator, you are using their merchant account. So you never have to apply for a merchant account yourself. It's a very easy process, and you pretty much pay for transaction. You are subscribed to be a sub-merchant with their account.
Okay.
Whereas when you are...
Go ahead, sorry.
Yeah, no problem. Whereas when you are using a true merchant account, like I mentioned before, it's a formal account application like I have in this slide, and you get a merchant ID number of your own, and it's a very direct relationship with your provider.
Great. Kind of a follow-up question to that one. Pedro wants to know, how do I know when I should use an aggregator versus a true merchant account for their business?
That's a great question. I think a good answer to that is it's perform. That's the first step that you have to take, of course, right? When you're going to work with merchant accounts, it's making yourself that question: what should I use, aggregators or true merchant account? And I think the answer relies on how much, what's the volume of your transactions monthly. I usually consider if you're making more than $6,000 a month, let's say $6,000 to $8,000 a month. If you're already past that, if your business is already generating more than $8,000 a month, regularly, constantly, it is time for you to move on, from my opinion, from an aggregator through merchant account, because you're going to be saving a lot of money on the fees that you're currently paying to these aggregators.
Okay, great. Thank you for that.
Okay. Well, if you consider that your company is at that stage where you're interested in transitioning from an aggregator to a true merchant account, these are some more details on what a true merchant account actually looks like. So, like I mentioned at the beginning, you're actually creating a relationship with the payment processing company. For example, if you're using TCs, they're gonna require you to make a formal account application, and they're going to ask a lot of questions. They usually have a very long questionnaire that they have to fill out in terms of whether you're selling, you have a product, physical product, or you're actually providing a service. They also want to know what's your industry, because like I mentioned before, depending on the industry that you're working at, there are specific regulations, and they have specific products that comply with regulations on, let's say, the healthcare industry, for example. So those packages, they have to adapt to your needs. The second point is that there's a direct pricing. So in order to give you a very detailed pricing, first they have to know what's your transaction limit, because that's the capacity that they're going to give you in their applications like payment gateways. And so you're going to have to define a transaction limit, a transaction average. Another very important question in terms of pricing is the credit card present or not? Because if the current credit card is not present, which is the case of a website, for example, that means that the risk of fraud is a lot higher. But if you only need a POS, a point of sale on your platform, on your physical business, then you don't actually need that risk protection. Then you also have to respond questions about your location, if you want to accept other currencies, and all this mix and match gives a very specific price to your application. Another advantage that you have when you work with True Merchant accounts is that since they already know everything about your business pretty much, they are there to assist you in if there's a problem with a transaction, for example. They're very accessible to contact. It doesn't, if you have a True Merchant account, this doesn't mean that you are protected to have your funds frozen. There's still a characteristic that you have to follow, whether you're using merchant accounts or aggregators. You have to be very honest about what you're selling and what you're using your applications for. If you're honest with the products and services that you're selling or you're providing at your company, it's going to be very unlikely that you're going to have a problem with your transactions. But another characteristic of having a very good customer support is that when your business grows, they are there to assist you in which are the new applications that you could be using in order to optimize your operations or save money. And the last one is that since what they provide is a merchant account, they give you a very large flexibility on the integrations that you can use. So if you want to keep using the same payment gateways that you have, they can allow you to do that. So some of them already have their own payment gateways. For example, TCs have their own payment gateway. First Data, they also have their own payment gateways, their own POS platforms. However, they also give you that flexibility to adapt to the ones that of your preference. And this is a great advantage.
Great, Roberto. Just two quick questions here, kind of now that you've fully explained True Merchant Services versus aggregators. The first question I have for you is which payment method, aka the aggregator versus the True Merchant, would you recommend to a client for their customer security?
For customer information security, I think my first answer would be both options. Either you want to go with aggregators or you want to go with True Merchant accounts. You have to make a research of your own to make sure that they are in compliance and that they are secure to use for your business. However, if you want to be more aware and more you want to have more specific security on your products, then I think you have to go for a through merchant account, since they have a very robust security network that they can rely on. Most of the through merchant account providers belong to this very powerful bank associations. Some of them become also belong to like credit card associations like Visa, for example, and they have a very solid security network that supports them.
Great, thanks, Roberto.
You're welcome. Well, regardless of whether you're using a true merchant account service provider or if you're using an aggregator, you still have some sort of flexibility on what are the apps and features that you want to integrate to your business. So at the end, what matters the most is understand what you want to do and what are the needs specific to your operations. So let's say, for example, that you have a business in which you want to provide your customers with the opportunity of a monthly subscription, and you want to create recurring payments. Or you also like Netflix, for example, you want to provide your customers with a 1-month trial of your product, or a very specific customizable interface. All of these features can be achieved by finding the right payment gateway, or POS, for your organization. And if you have a website, for example, and you want to collect data and also analyze that data, you will most likely have to work with a form, not only with a payment gateway. So forms providers like Form Assembly, Form Stack, for example, they also have a very wide variety of features that you can integrate to your business. You can create key performance indicators, reports, and metrics. Very advanced integrations with other applications. You can also create automatic contracts and send them to your clients to be electronically signed. And another important thing is that if you are going to use this for your website and you have very specific industry regulations that you have to comply, every application that you use has to follow those regulations. And last, applications. What happens at the end of the process? After you have received all that information from your customers that you gather through your website into a form, what do you want to do with that information? If you would like to create periodic reports and send them, schedule to send them to a specific member of your organization at a specific time a day, every day or every week, you can get this flexibility, this specific application through Salesforce, for example. Or you want to have an ERP application and you want to optimize your finances, your accounting operations of your companies. You can also integrate an ERP software, Microsoft Dynamics, or an accounting or finance software like QuickBooks or Charging, for example. On a very special note, due to the situation that we're going through these days with COVID-19, another thing that you also would like to provide your clients, your customers with, is the opportunity of having a contactless payment solution. And those are available out there, and most of them are look very sleek and very aesthetically appealing to your clients. So, especially during these times, providing these options for your customers might be what makes the difference from them going to your store instead of going to the traditional cash-only grocery store, for example.
Thank you for that, Roberto. A couple of questions here that came in while you were on this slide. The first one that I have is from Jackie. Jackie asks, is it generally safe to accept payments via your website?
Thank you, Jackie, for that question. It is safe to accept payments through your website, but you have to find the right solution to integrate it in your website. And once you find the right solution, let's say that you want to work with Authorize.net. That's only the payment portion, the payment integration. You most likely will have to integrate it to a form. Let's say that you're going to pick form assembly to collect information. When you do that connection between Authorize.net and form assembly, you have to make sure that all the sensitive information, like credit card information, credit card number, and the code of the credit card is completely securely stored. So in other words, that nobody can ever access it. That is a configuration process that you have to go through. But these companies, most of these companies have worked extensively to be able to provide these solutions together. And once you do this configuration, it's a very secure port of information, and you're going to be able to perform these operations safely.
Great. One last question before we move on here. This one is from an anonymous writer. They say, Roberto, thank you for this information. Which, if any, of these payment apps do you recommend over others?
That's also well, that I'm going to say that there is not a best solution out there, but there is a right solution for what you need in your business. In other words, it depends on what your business, where is your business right now. If you're going to go for a true merchant account provider, very powerful, a very powerful and very solid company could be TSYS or First Data. And one of the best payment gateways that you can use could be Authorize.net. One of the advantages of using Authorize.net is that it pretty much connects with any form, with any CRM. So those are very, I think, very powerful applications and companies. But if you're not at a level where you want to take this step of going for a true merchant account provider, and you want to use an aggregator, which is what they call an all-in-one solution, I think, for example, WePay works very well. They have the support of Chase as a company. The Stripe is a very common one, very famous one. And I think Stripe also has very good capabilities in terms of security and accessibility. So I think those would be kind of like my personal choices. But again, it depends on what you want to do with your business.
Great. Thanks for that, Roberto.
Thank you, Chayton. So, and this is actually related to the next slide. And the question here is, okay, we've been hearing a lot about so many different apps, CRM applications, ERP, etc. How do I know what to use for my business? And on this part, I will be speaking from the point of view of somebody that is leading a project, an application project. Since most of these applications are actually software solutions, something that works very well for us is to use software development lifecycle steps. So the first one starts by collecting your requirements. Here you want to ask yourself 3 questions. The first one is, what do I want? What do I need? That's the first one. What do I need? And let's say that, for example, right now in your business, what's most important for you is just to find a solution to collect payments. And you need to be in compliance with your industry, so payments and compliance. That's what you need. The second question is, what would you like to have? So let's say that after you collect those payments and that information, you would like to have a CRM application to perform some analytics and analyze that data and see how you can improve in your business. And the last question has to be, how do I get this with the best cost benefit? So in other words, what fits your budget at this moment? So the second step would be to, once you have an idea of what you want to use, is the mapping process. So you have to put everything on paper or digitally, if you prefer, and understand. First, the most important thing is understand if these applications that you want to use are capable of being integrated together. So if you're even capable of integrate all of those applications. The third and fourth step would be to develop and test, which is a consolidated step. You have to develop and test. And the last step would be to support and maintenance. After your application goes live, you are going to need support and maintenance pretty much forever. So my only advice at this point is make sure that you have all the contacts information of the people, all the players involved, all your service providers, the developing company, so that you prevent any type of downtime on your application. So to talk a little bit more in detail about these 5 steps, the first one being requirements. If you're starting a project, you might want to ask yourself or the company that you're doing this project for 5 questions. The first one is, what do they do? You know, what are their products, their services, their transactions limits, and this will give you an idea of what type of applications they need at this moment. Another question is, what are the currencies and locations where they will be accepting payments? This is also a very important question in terms of understanding which applications are available out there for us. Third, and I think one of the most important questions would be industry compliance, to understand which industry this company is working with. So if it's the healthcare industry, for example, you have to make sure that each application that you use has to be compliant with HIPAA, for example. If it's a financial industry, you have to make sure that these applications have PCI DSS compliance that we talked at the beginning, W9 validation. This is for this is to report the annual gross credit card transactions history to the IRS. EMB also compliance. EMB stands for Europe Pay, MasterCard, and Visa, which is pretty much which were the 3 companies that created these regulations, which is pretty much credit card chip payment, payment through chip. And they also have very extended regulations that you have to comply with if you're working in this industry. And an extra note would be for nonprofits. So if your organization is a nonprofit 501c3 organization, there are a lot of regulations that you have to comply with in order to maintain your status as a nonprofit. And so you have to be very careful in the applications that you select at this point. Besides, most of these applications provide discounts for nonprofits. So if you would like to use an application that does not give any kinds of discount, maybe that's not the right solution for you, since there are others that are going to give you a better price. The fourth question would be, what do you want to do with your data? So if at the end of this process you'd like to integrate a data management tool like a CRM or an ERP solution. And the fifth question will be, after you receive the payment and the payment goes to your bank, would you like to integrate an accounting or a finance software to automate your process? So that's it with requirements. Once you gather all the requirements that you need and you have an idea of what are the applications that you want to use, you start the process of mapping, so putting them together. So what we recommend in this step is to create an application solution design document or an integration design document, which is a document that contains wireframes and process flows and a lot of details. And at the end, what we want to know is how is the data, how is the information going to flow from one application to the other. So for the sake of the example, this is a generic example. Let's say that you have your first point of entry will be a CMS, a content management system, or a website. These website provider that could be Wix, could be WordPress, or any other, it has to have the capability of support all these other payment applications, forms, etc., that you would like to integrate together. The second stop for the data is your data collection point on your website, which are your forms. Your forms provider, first, many CMS companies, many website provider companies have their own forms, but maybe some of them have some limitations and you would like to use the one of your preference. So again, you have to make sure that those forms have all industry compliance and that they integrate together with the rest of the applications that you want to use. And on the same way, you decide on everything else on every other step of your process. If you're using your payment gateway, at this point, you're going to have to decide whether you're going to use an aggregator or a true merchant account. If you're going to use a true merchant account, you will have to apply for that merchant account and then connect that to your bank. So after the transaction is approved, the money will go to your bank, and the final information of the transaction and everything on your form will go to your CRM application. That could be Salesforce, your customer relationship management application. That could be either Salesforce or any other. And through Salesforce or any other CRM, you would be able to perform very powerful reports and understand better how to improve your business. Something that you can add, and it's a very useful application, is a financial software or an ERP. So you can connect your bank account to your software, and through this application, you can standardize your consolidations at the end of the month. You can manage your bank accounts and makes all the information more visible, and also it gives you a good transaction record and history that you can provide as an evidence if you whenever you need to provide evidence for compliance purposes. So just to show you a real life example of how a solution design would look. The first, if you remember, is a CMS application, and we've decided to use Wix since it's very friendly, user-friendly, and it also allows the possibility of using so many different applications, and it's a very good application to start off. In this case, our data collection point, we've selected Form Assembly, and Form Assembly has a direct integration with Authorize.net as a payment gateway. So you just have to connect that through Authorize.net. And at this point, Authorize.net gives you a possibility of an all-in-one service, so that they take care of everything in terms of merchant account, and you can use their merchant account. So they also have the possibility of being used as an aggregator, or you can apply for your own merchant account with first data, for example, and use reduce your fees and payments at the end of the month. Something that I don't have here, but if you have also a physical business, you can also add a POS, a different POS, or a physical terminal to this process. But at the end, you connect this payment processing company, First Data, to your bank, which in this example I put Bank of America, but it could be any bank that you'd like. And you connect your Bank of America account to QuickBooks for automated reports, consolidations, etc. And at the end, all your data could flow to Salesforce, where you can create as many reports and manage and analyze your data as much as you'd like. An important feature that I want to mention is that you can decide, for example, when you're working with form assembly or with any other form, you can decide if you want them also to store the data and use these forms as also as an analytics tool, or if you wouldn't like them to have access to your data, they can just work as a connector to your CRM application, and your entire data will be only accessible on your Salesforce account, for example.
Great. Before we move on here, Roberto, couple of questions kind of more about the design of the payment gateways for, digital platforms. The first one is from, Lakshmi. She asked, is it difficult to switch between payment gateways? Kind of like an example, they're working with Stripe right now, but they're looking to switch over to maybe Square or WePay. Does this mean they're going to have to kind of restructure their entire process?
If you're using Stripe and you want to switch to WePay, for example, it is not an uncommon operation. It happens all the time. I think the only thing that you have to be careful is if you have subscriptions. For example, if your website does subscriptions, let's say monthly subscriptions, that credit card information is already stored on your WePay, for example, if you want to move from WePay to Stripe. So all those applications, all those subscriptions, let's say you have, 500 subscribers already on your account, and then you want to move to Stripe because it works better for you and you like it better how the interface is, and it interacts better with your forms, etc. If you do that, you will have to request a transfer of data that happens from company to company. So in this case, you won't be able to do that data transfer on your own. There is a way of doing that transfer of those subscriptions, but it happens between WePay and Stripe directly. So that'll be the only, I think, kind of like bump in the road to do that a transfer. But other than that, it's a very common thing to switch from one provider to the other, and all of them right now at this level, Stripe, WePay, PayPal, all of them have it's a very competitive field right now, and they are ready also to interact with each other to transfer this kind of bulk data.
Okay. One more quick question. Someone writes here, can the payment gateways be used with already existing integrations? So kind of to elaborate a little bit here, let's say they wanted to switch out, the first data for, another payment platform, but they already have this kind of solution design set up in the background here. Is that going to be a huge issue?
I think that's that example that you just mentioned is even it depends on the most difficult thing is the subscriptions, right? Because if you don't have any subscriptions and you just have a lot of information that you would like to transfer, you can download that information. We do what we call a data migration from one platform to the other. And the only complicated part that you're going to have is to integrate your new solution with your existing integration system. But other than that, once you have that integration done, you can disable the previous application that you had. You can create, you can make a bulk download of the data and then import that data to your new solution, and everything should match. However, like I mentioned before, if you already have subscriptions, or if you know how when you go to your to Amazon, for example, they already have all your credit card information there. If you move from one payment processing company to the other, that information, that pre-stored information of your credit card would disappear unless you do these two companies do a transfer of information. So yeah, it takes some time. It's going to take some effort, but once you do it, everything is going to flow easily as it used to do before with your previous provider, and hopefully better, because I'm assuming that's the reason why you would like to do something like that.
Okay, great. Thanks for that, Roberto.
You're welcome, Jake. So the last two steps, the last two stops of this software development lifecycle in this project is actually 3 steps: develop the application and test. And the reason why I put develop and test together is because these applications have to be developed and tested simultaneously. So if we go back to the example of a digital project, a website, the first thing that you have to do is to develop your form. Make sure that you are collecting all the information that you need to collect from your subscribers or your buyers, the people that goes to your website. After you have created your form, you're going to have to connect the payment processor, which is pretty much a mapping of the information that you have on your form to your payment processor. The third step would be to test this application. So if you are working on a website that already exists, you're going to have to notify, the first thing is to notify your customers on your website that you're going to be in maintenance mode. And while you're doing this, people are not going to be able to buy, right, anything, because your application is going to be on processing testing transactions. After you do this, you'll have to go to your payment processor and your form and start testing mode setup. Usually they give you a testing API key that you can just input on your form, and once you are in testing mode, you can use dummy credit cards to test your website. There's a variety of dummy credit cards that you can use for each and every one of the credit card associations: Visa, Discover, MasterCard, American Express. All of them have dummy credit cards that you can use in your application, so you don't have to, every time that you test, you don't have to use your credit card, right? Something very important that I always put here is test all your features. So if you have a subscription option, you want to make sure that that subscription works correctly, because you don't want your customers to go to your website, try to make a one-time payment, and accidentally subscribe to a recurring payment, monthly payment. You don't want that to happen. So you want to make sure that you test everything twice, at least. The last thing on the testing would be to reset your live mode. Otherwise, people are going to go to your website and they're not going to be able to pay because you're still in testing mode. Once you know that your application works, you are going to need to embed that code, Java code, HTML code on your website. And now it's available for everyone to use. And once everything works correctly, now you can integrate as many other integrations as you'd like. In other words, now is the moment to integrate your Salesforce, your Microsoft Dynamics, or your financial software, and make sure that you're doing everything that you'd like to do with your data. The last stop of this presentation would be the last the last step of the software development lifecycle, which is maintenance and support. It's important because no matter how good the applications are, especially when you have so many applications connected together, applications tend to break. So since we're talking about payments, and this is what sustains your business, you want to have the minimum amount of downtime possible in this. Also, the applications constantly upgrade and give the opportunity to give more different integrations, so the codes might change. Anyhow, you need to be able to, like I said at the beginning of these slides, have the contact information of your developing company, have the contact information provided together, and give all those contacts to the person of your organization that will take care of that in a situation like this best. And the last thing is support. If you're supporting a project of this and the project is now over or in maintenance stage, you might also, with your clients, like to have bi-weekly or monthly meetings. These meetings are to request evidence of the transactions that you're performing with your application, because the most important thing in terms of compliance is to make sure that once you have this application functional, you are using it to sell or to provide the services that you stated at the beginning you were going to start doing. For example, if you said that you were going to be selling t-shirts and shorts, and you want to start selling groceries or other things, you might have to notify the payment processing company, pretty much everyone involved in the process, so that you don't face any problems with downtime or frozen funds, etc. And I think that one of the most interesting things of having a relationship with a developing company or with a consulting company or an application, hopefully your company is growing and you'll need hopefully your company is growing and you'll move on to the next application.
Great. Yeah, sorry for that. I think I had a little technical difficulties on my side. So yeah, it cut me out there for a second. So Roberto, thank you so much for your informational webinar on merchant services and digital payments. And thank you everyone for attending and asking your engaging questions. I apologize if we weren't able to get to your questions, but we can reach out to you via some contact information if you would like to set up, further time to discuss any of the questions that you may have posed in the chat here. And if you'd like to just learn more about BraunWeiss, please follow us on LinkedIn, visit our website at braunweiss.net, or send us a quick email at connect@braunweiss.net. Again, Roberto, thank you so much for your time and have a wonderful day.
Thank you, Chayton. Have a good one, everyone.